Hi, my name is Chris Liddle, and I am the host of The Lifestyle Chase. In 2018, I started this show to have meaningful conversations. I've interviewed over 100 different people, both in and out of the fitness industry. This podcast is something I'm incredibly proud of. Welcome to Season 4. Thanks for joining me. Alright, so welcome back to the Lifestyle Chase. I am continuing on my series of client series episodes. So this particular episode features my friend and past client, Erin Marsh, and she remotely trained with me from about January 2020 till about July 2020. It was super cool because she essentially piloted my remote training system, essentially. So you got to be one of the very first remote clients. But with all that aside, how are you doing on this Thursday morning?
Good. It's a snowy day in Lethbridge. I was quite surprised, to be honest. I was thinking this weekend I would be planting my bulbs. I still might, but it's a good day so far. It's just started, so
yeah, exactly.
There's room for opportunity.
Well, it's funny how like the weather is like snow, melt, snow, melt, snow, melt. Like it's just unpredictable. Before we dive too much further into the episode, I want my audience to know exactly who you are, what you do, what your profession is, what your background is.
Yeah. So I'm a certified athletic therapist by trade. So if I was to explain that to anyone, most people would automatically think, oh, well, is that the same thing as physio? It's similar in some ways. So most people would think of a physio as someone that, bone, muscle, joint, they'll treat a problem for you in a clinic setting. But an AT is kind of a much broader spectrum of treating those types of injuries. So we see someone on the field when it happens. So, like the Raptors, they have an AT. A lot of pro teams have an AT on their bench. So we see people right when an injury happens. We treat them in that clinical setting, just like a physio. And then we also see them afterwards. So we're making sure that their return to sport is going well, it's safe, and we can make adjustments along the way. So it's a lot broader in terms of when we treat someone. But our scope is very narrow. It's just bone, muscle, joints versus physio could be something like teaching someone how to walk after having a stroke or how to breathe again after open heart surgery or something. So athletic therapy, I chose it for that reason. It's just bone, muscle, joints. It's related to sports. We understand the demands that sports and the stress that sports can put on the body, but that applies to anyone. If you have an activity that you'd like to get back to that requires certain demands, and so we can help you return to that activity or even just be more resilient in your body. So athletic therapy is a huge part of my story. I've been doing that since 2017. That's when I certified. I went to Mount Royal University for the athletic therapy program and the University of Lethbridge for an exercise science degree. So I am fully surrounded by exercise and activity most of the time. So, yeah, that's my story.
And with regards to like where people will find you in Lethbridge, like what kind of spaces do you occupy? What kind of places do you work at? What's that story like?
So when I finished my undergrad at the U of L, I ended up starting work right away at a private clinic inside the university. It's called Rebound Health Center. And since then, that clinic has grown into many more clinics. So I work at one of the satellite clinics. It's called Rebound Performance Center. So that's where I work now. So within Lethbridge, that's between the west side and north side of Lethbridge. I do spend a lot of time in my backyard as well. I love to garden. So if I'm not working, I am playing in the dirt, basically.
If we were to hop in the time machine and go back to 2020, basically right around when you started training with me remotely, but also to think about how like just the whole pandemic has altered people's lives, or just like helped us lean into more professional development, or maybe had us grow in ways that we didn't expect. Like what has your experience of the last like 2 or so years been?
I think in a way it's kind of it's a point of time that I kind of gauge life on now, like, oh, that happened before COVID, or that happened after COVID. I think when COVID initially started, it was definitely a shock, like having a lot of your personal life completely shifted. Knowing what you depend on in life, what really matters, became very clear right away. For a lot of people, I think that's very true. And so it kind of became this adapt or you'll get left behind type situation. If you stay here in this in-person space, things will be tricky versus doing something virtually. So at that point, I had reached out to you in January, and we had begun our online training. And that really carried me through a lot of keeping the accountability on my own health and growing from there, really, building a lot more mentality aspects. So the gym that I was going to in person was still doing an online book club. And we read this book. Brandon Buffton, who used to be a coach there, had introduced me to this book called Atomic Habits. I'm sure you've heard of that book.
Yeah, I think I've given it a shout out in like 3 past episodes.
Yeah. So I read that book, and I've since come along someone else. So, pop psychology is a huge part of some people improving their health, but I came across another individual online over COVID as well. I feel like I've connected with a lot of people online over COVID, you being one of them. Her name is Karen Norden, and she actually studies behavior change. And so she'd be an interesting one. You'd enjoy her page. But just the concept of cognitive flexibility is something that I learned, and it's been great for my personal life as well as helping patients. Just going with the flow would be the simplest way to explain it, but it's a huge concept and it is mind-blowing. So yeah, that was a lot of COVID to start. So yeah.
The cool thing is that there is so much to be grateful for in those little like moments. I mean, I was listening to a podcast this morning just as I was making my coffee, and it was just like reflecting on how sometimes we forget to be grateful for like basically, and for anybody that's just tuning in now, the podcast that I listened to was Case Kenny's New Mindset Who Dis. I've had him on the show a couple times, and he puts out episodes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and he alluded to the song, I think it's by AJR, and it shows up in a bunch of reels, and it's like, can we skip to the good part? And what I liked about that is he talked about how oftentimes we're waiting to skip to that good part. Like we're waiting until like we get our dream house, or we're waiting until we get that certain amount of work to be able to keep us in a financially stable position or whatever. And we're not taking time to really like enjoy the in-between parts where we're in the motions of getting to where we want to be, or where we're simply alive, or where we're able to walk around, and all these little things that make life especially rewarding. And so it's just like little things like that I've kind of tuned into over COVID, and I know that for yourself you have as well. One thing that I wanted to highlight before we kind of dive further down more of these rabbit holes, such as the garden per se, but when we first connected, we actually both went or worked at the same camp. So Kasota East Camp, shout out to them. And I think it's so cool that just when people go through life, they'll make these connections, and those connections can last a long time. I know that a few of the Keck alumni went to my like spin class and stuff like that, so I've kind of reconnected with people over the years. But that's always been something that has kind of made me pretty happy about just how the choices I made in my teenager years. Like I could have ended up in a totally different place during the summer, and I just happened to end up there. And just the connections that we make in our lives are pretty cool. And that's kind of like enjoying those little moments and those little connection pieces, similar to how we're in COVID, or we were in COVID, or whatever phase we're in, especially when people are listening to this later. The destination is just as good, or the journey is just as good as the destination, I should say. Like, we don't need to be focused so much on that endpoint. We can be excited about the journey and getting there. But I did allude to the garden, and that was something that I really that was something where I was learning from you in our sessions. You'd show me the garden, you'd show me how you were setting boundaries to put energy into something that was going to help you down the road. And I was, holy crap, I should be taking out the notebook. I should be taking notes. So what inspired the garden in the first place? What was like the reason or the why behind that?
I don't know if there is a specific reason why. I think it just kind of came on its own. I mean, my mom always had a garden on the farm, and it was a huge garden, you know, like my sister Carly and I would help her pick peas and shell peas into a bucket for like an hour or two in the summer. And, you know, there was always that satisfaction of pulling the weeds and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I started my own garden. It would have been 3 or 4 years ago, just some raised boxes in my backyard. And that became learning how to can beets and make jam and that. So I think in itself it was not just time where I could enjoy being outside. It was also this is time for me to let my mind wander, to just breathe and, you know, just kind of enjoy the moment, be present, but also learn something new and learn how to do something new. And I think that's a huge part of why people choose to be physically active as well, is they reach out to a coach because they have that knowledge, and there's that opportunity to really take a step into what you are possibly capable of and seek that opportunity to become better at something and enjoy the process. So I think that equates really well to why I love gardening, is that it would be like going on a walk or a run or a bike ride for me. You know, it gives me those same effects. I have to walk by my garden to get to my door, and so I haven't even barely left work and I'm already kind of immersed in it. So it in itself was an environment where I could take that time away from COVID, where the news and social media was really just blowing up in your face all the time, and really just have some space. So yeah, that's the story of my garden.
Well, there's a lot to take away from that. And the things that I think about most are just the fact that it's kind of like a holistic way of sort of like setting those boundaries around your life. You talked about how you almost had to walk past it to do anything else. And so it's like, okay, well, now it's like it's part of your lifestyle, it's part of your routine. And it sort of correlates with a lot of the personal development books that we were talking about earlier in the episode, where we're talking about things like Atomic Habits, and just sort of like when I think about those kinds of topics, I think about how looking inward and like focusing on like the day as one day, as the 24 hours, we're able to sort of like focus on more of a routine or more of a structure, or just focusing on what we can control, or just our mentality towards it. And sometimes it's not as complicated as what it may seem. Like, we don't necessarily need to get like some crazy fancy meditation program, or we don't necessarily need to leave our house to find that structure, to find a sense of calmness, or just inspiration. We simply need to integrate something into our lifestyle that can assist with our goals. So with that being said, you would get the benefits of having like fresh produce at your house. And that is a huge benefit, especially with inflation on food prices. I can only imagine how much you would have saved, hopefully, over the long term, like being able to reuse certain seeds for certain like vegetables and stuff, or at least not having to pay the price at the store, paying the price for like what you produced instead, like just the labor and the water and all that stuff that goes into it.
Yes.
Of all the things that you grew, which one was your favorite?
Oh, don't ask me that question.
They're all my babies.
Oh God. Yeah, that's a really hard question. I think I love to grow beets, and that kind of comes from my dad. He loved my mom's canned beets, and so she always made canned beets, and I always watched her make canned beets. And so I was like, I should give this a try. They are the best vegetable ever. You can cook them so many ways. They can be sweet, but they can also be pretty neutral if you just have them not canned. So I'd say beets. They're a pretty resilient plant, and they survive the Lethbridge weather. So
True that. Like, I mean, I for one have consumed a lot of beets over the last couple of years, and I think it most likely is because of their resilience. Like, essentially, I'll go out to my parents' farm, and my mom will set me up with some produce and some like fresh beef. And quite often, I'm the one who is most enthusiastic about beets. I kind of attribute it to, like, I'm pretty sure BioSteel is made with like beet powder. So it's great for just recovery from workouts. I mean, just like any vegetable is going to be beneficial because it's going to have things that help us like absorb water and help us recover and help us with our immune system and with our digestive system and everything else. But it's cool because like we can take something that another person might be like, whatever, it's just like one vegetable, but we can in fact like capitalize on these things that other people overlook. And then sort of like live out a more abundant lifestyle and kind of capitalize on more things that other people might have just like completely bypassed. But to transition into a new topic here, we've talked about the garden, and I hope a lot of people are inspired to start a garden of their own. But one thing that I always noticed when we were doing the check-ins, you were always really good about planning things, like just non-work things. And that was solid because I think sometimes people struggle with that. So you'd go on like hiking trips, or I think you've gone on skiing trips in the past, stuff like that. What is the sort of like barometer for you that tells you that it's time to go on a big adventure or go escape? And like, what is the compass that guides you towards where you're going to go or what you're going to
do? That's a good question. I think a lot of the time I kind of seek those nature activities. And that's kind of one piece of it. I think there's many layers to it, and that it's a social thing as well. So oftentimes, my weekend trip out to the mountains is usually to meet a friend. I have a lot of friends in Edmonton, actually. I've got a girlfriend who's taking her doctor schooling out in Penticton, and so taking trips further up in Alberta or further east, west, south usually takes me to someone. So I've done backcountry camping trips and snowshoeing, hiking, all that kind of stuff. I'd say it's usually a social thing for me. I'd say it is in itself a part of my mental health as well. So it is, kind of, as you're saying, a barometer of, oh, I need some time away. But something that I've heard, and I think you'll probably resonate with as well, is if you have been feeling off for 24 hours, you need to resolve it within 48 hours. And that's not always ideal with waiting for the weekend to come, but you can make plans pretty quickly if you want to decide to do something. So trying not to stew or carry too much weight if there's something stressful going on. And being out in nature is the simplest way for me to do that. So I go for walks around town quite frequently, bike rides depending on the weather. So yeah, I'd say my barometer is probably driven not entirely by the physical health part of it. It's a lot of the mental health, but also just the social aspect of health. So it is a huge part of, I guess, my identity. So it's just, again, kind of like the garden, just kind of comes easy. So being someone who grew up on a farm and is always in nature, it's kind of nostalgic all the time, going into nature and just exploring or playing in the dirt in the garden. So yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the word identity in relation to like routines and recharging, I think that's really important for people. If a person was thinking to themselves, "I wish I could do that," well, why not make that part of your identity? Like for a lot of people who sort of just put their foot down and make sure that they're staying active in some way is because they consider themselves an active person, no matter what they look like or what other people think of them. They are like, I am an active human being and I lead an active lifestyle. And because they're able to say that about themselves, they're able to make conscious decisions where it's like, okay, well, we're not going to the gym today, but we are going for a walk, or we are going for a bike ride, or we are going to hike up that hill or that mountain. And that is what makes us an active person. So like when people struggle to make like a behavior change or start a journey or move closer towards their goal, I think it's very, very important to think about it that way. Because it's just like we only have so much time to make the changes that we need to get the outcomes that we want. We can make all these excuses for decades on end, and if we make them continually, it'll be harder to make that change. And so my hope is that people listen to other people's stories and are able to understand, like, okay, like this, it's really not that complicated. It's just a matter of like telling yourself that you are an active person, or that you need to connect or have a community that supports you. And so in order to be supported by that community and support the community back, you need to stay in contact with those people. Like I liked how when you do travel to places, it's a little bit less about the destination, a little bit more about the person that you're meeting up with. So like because I can say that I have met a lot of people through COVID, through the internet, but then I've also met a lot of people through past jobs, whether they be full-time jobs, part-time jobs. And what I've learned about myself is like the connection for me is above all else. Like I would take longer to grow a business if it meant that I had stronger connections with people. And that is just something that I learned. I learned that like sometimes it's less about a sale or less about like a transaction and more about the experience that you have and knowing a person and like being totally honest with them and transparent and loyal. For you, as you've connected with people and kind of collected people into your circle, what have you found to be the sort of the origin of it all? Like, how do you meet people? How are you connecting with them? What makes a connection last and what makes one fade away?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Um, I think, kind of as you had alluded to, um, your connections are a reflection of how you treat people. Um, I've known you for a long time, and I knew you as a teenager. Basically, you were my camp counselor, and I went on to be a camp counselor. I found you online when I was, going through university, and have kind of followed you and had that eye on your page over the years. So, as you were saying, it's easy to make connections with people, and how you treat people. That's what they remember. They don't remember, even with me working with patients. Patients don't remember years down the road how you explained how their knee works. They remember how you treated them, if you listened to what they wanted to say, and how their experience was with you. So I think the same applies in your personal life, as well as is treating people how you would like to be treated. And a lot of the closest connections I have made with people is that it was in a safe space where we connected over something mutual. Funnily enough, it has been the gym a lot lately, is meeting my friends at the gym, or during something physically active. A lot of the connections I still have are from high school, and then university. So moving forward into work, it's been my colleagues. A lot of people wouldn't think you would get close to your colleagues, but I think athletic therapists maybe are a little bit of a different breed. We rely on one another. We network with one another. If you're working with a sports team and you can't cover a weekend, you ask someone else to help you out. So athletic therapists are very good at that kind of thing. So I'd say connecting with people is, as you were saying, it's a huge part of who you are as a person. Who you surround yourself with kind of reflects who you are. If you're an active person, you've got some active friends. If you love the art of cuisine, you have friends that love the art of cuisine, or gardening, or those sorts of things. So yeah, I think you're right, though, in saying that a lot of people have connected with people online this year. I think you were probably my first touch point with COVID. And then I met Chantel Erickson. She's also in Lethbridge, but she's a personal trainer as well. And she instructs classes at some of the gyms in Lethbridge. And she's also her personality is very fierce. So connecting with someone that will advocate for your health just as much as they're advocating for their own health. She's a mom of 2 kids, and she's just an amazing role model. So having people that you are friends with, but also mentor with. Chantel is also a financial advisor, and so she has helped me improve the financial health in my life, as well as physical health in my life. I've gone to a few of her classes here now that things have opened up again, and she's a spitfire. I really enjoy spending my time with her. So yeah, there's so many connections that I've made throughout COVID. It's kind of weird to say that, but as an introvert, and someone that has maybe fought a little too hard to reserve my energy, I have it has coincided that I have also met a lot of people being an introvert, if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
it's very, very relatable. I myself am also an introvert, and like a lot of people that I work with, either as clients or as colleagues, are also introverted.
Mhm.
And there's something about the takeoff of these one-on-one video calls that have allowed introverts to really thrive. Like we're out here living our best life and being able to have like meaningful conversations rather than just like talking about things that don't really matter at the end of the day. As we're kind of like going into the months where travel is more possible and where there's less restrictions and just more options, like what are you excited about after everything that you've learned and after how much you've grown? Like what are you going to be doing in like the next few years that just gets you fired up about life?
Something that I'm really excited to do is go and visit my family in Australia again. Um, with my schooling in athletic therapy, I was going year round and then just kind of jumped straight into work. And it's been 7 or 8 years now since I've been there. So I'm excited to go there. Um, I still have a living grandparent over there, and she's my last grandma alive. So I'm like, I need to go. As we're saying, those relationships are important. And while you have them, it's really important. So I'm really thankful that I'm close with my family, my parents, my siblings, my extended family. And so going and seeing them, I think, is kind of next on my list. So, yeah. Have you ever been to Australia?
I have never been to Australia, although I have virtually visited.
Oh,
There's,
really?
well, not, I mean, you know what I mean. Like, I've interviewed a few people from Australia, and so I'll be watching through their stories, and there's a couple past guests. One of them just opened a gym there. So it's definitely on my bucket list. Like, one of my goals for myself and for this podcast, like, I hope to one day build the podcast enough that it can support my livelihood through like ad partners or like business partnerships where, let's say, if there was a business that aligned with me and aligned with my values and I could promote them authentically and in turn be incentivized in a way that helped me to travel or helped to pay for expenses, then I would start to use that budget to go and travel to the guests that I interview or to actually check out the gym that I talked about that was being opened, or so many trainers in the industry are having kids throughout all of this COVID stuff. So I kind of want to see the kids, and I
Mhm.
want to see the dogs, and I want to see the walking trails. And it's just like that's sort of where I want to go with the future, but I kind of want to have like an accountability piece with your goal. You talked about how you want to go to Australia. Like what is the time frame for that for you? Like sometimes sort of like setting more of a concise like deadline helps. So like what does that look like for you?
I would normally go around Christmas time. When I go, it's you want to take at least 3 weeks because you're gonna need several days to adapt to the time change and just to count for the travel time. So um, it would be a month of my time probably to go there and just spend time with everyone, explore around a little bit. Um, so yeah, that I'm hoping, if possible, this year, maybe next year. So I have nailed it down. It's happening. I'm looking forward to it. So
That's
yeah.
good. That is good. I mean, like that's kind of like the exciting things about I just what we often take for granted now we get to really capitalize on, I guess.
Yeah.
Because in the past, like let's say like 2018, a person would be like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna go travel," and it's like, "Yeah, okay, well, I'm just gonna go buy an Xbox." And now it's like, I'm going to go travel because I missed connecting with people so much, or I missed out on so many experiences, and now I'm never going to let that happen again. Like I hope
Mhm.
that kind of sticks with people. I hope it doesn't like fade away, and I hope that people take a more initiative into what they can do. Like it's by no means is doing the things that we really want to do easy. I mean, like when we're working in a career that's quite fulfilling and we're getting to work with people, it's not an easy career, but it's much more rewarding. And in comparison, like, would I rather be doing like a strictly labor job where I never saw people and I never talked to people and I worked super long hours, but then I had all this stability and I could buy like all these different items? No, like that's not who I am. So I'd rather find ways to keep the business afloat while through COVID, while through all the gym closures, and then find ways to be able to visit podcast guests or trainer friends and see dogs and mountaintops and all kinds of stuff. So then because sometimes I map out like 10 years from now. So I'm curious, what do you map out for yourself when you're looking 10 years from now? Obviously, you can't predict everything. There's a lot of different things that can change, a lot of moving parts. But do you foresee yourself taking more education? Do you foresee yourself moving? Do you foresee yourself just ascending in your career in some specific way?
I think it could take several turns, to be honest. I'm always looking for more ways to help my patients. So I think in a way there will be a lot of professional development for sure. I do foresee that I'll probably go back to school, whether that'll be, like a master's, learning something specific about the musculoskeletal system or a certain patient demographic. I've just started getting into private patient practice this year, so working one-on-one with patients versus groups like athletes or university teams. So that in itself is kind of its own expedition that's kind of happening right now. So there's so much down the road that I think could happen. I do something called fascial stretch therapy. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's super fun and relaxing. It's kind of the same experience as a massage. You're laying on a table relaxed, but I'm moving you into positions that are stretching. So great for your joint health, great for flexibility of your muscles. But I'm excited to see that grow and to help people who are maybe not necessarily injured, but help explore that realm of people that are looking to improve their health and how they move and feel, and change healthcare from this dynamic of we're helping the people that are really, really sick and really need help versus people that could be preventing health problems down the road. So helping people learn about their bodies and how they work and how they can take advantage of what their body is capable of is something that I look forward to continue doing. And in my personal life, I'd really like to really lean into those connections with people. So as you were saying, I think COVID has really helped individuals. What's that song? You don't know what you've got till it's gone. Paved paradise. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think being in Lethbridge, most of my family is a little bit further north. I'm hoping to spend a little bit more time connecting with them. My parents are getting close to retirement. And I'm sure my mom's going to want to go back to Australia. So try and spend some time with them before they disappear on their travels. And my sister, she's a teacher up there towards Sylvan Lake. So, really lean into those friendships, spend a little bit more time, getting out and about, not just on the weekends, maybe intentionally taking some time off to go and explore and spend more time with friends. So I'd say those are kind of the two biggest pieces of my life that will probably really flourish out of COVID, but I'll still be gardening. So
yeah. Well, it's important for people to hear other people kind of reflect on what's to come. because sometimes we'll forget what's possible unless we hear somebody else speak passionately about what they have on their desktop, like what their plans are and what gets them fired up. And like that's part of the joy in it. Like, a lot of people will talk about travel and about how like the anticipation of the trip is one of the most exciting parts. Like, if we use Disneyland as an example, like, is Disneyland the exciting part, or is it the countdown to when a person leaves for Disneyland? That's the exciting part. And like the night before they're going to hop on the plane kind of thing. And so it all comes down to having that identity that, whether it be like in the value system, like family, friends, kind of above just the financial pursuits being part of your value system, or whether it be that being active is part of your identity, or whether it be that gardening brings a person peace. Like, these pillars of a person are super important in kind of going after that fulfilling lifestyle, and kind of making the best of tough situations. Because life isn't always like perfect. Life isn't always like happy and sunshine and rainbows and like butterflies. Sometimes life tosses us some challenges and we have to be resilient, similar to how everybody's had to be over the last 2 years. But if we take it in stride, it makes it a lot easier. It makes it more manageable, or at least makes it so that we feel like we have some sense of autonomy in that realm. Something that I get all of my guests to do is to give the audience a challenge, something that you think would make their life a little bit better, or something that might put them out of their comfort zone. Essentially, all you got to do is say your challenge for the day is, and just put it out to the universe.
My challenge for the day for you is to learn something new. That could be anything. It could be a concept. It could be learning how to do something, woodwork, making music. It could be whatever you want it to be. Learning something is a great way to spend your time. It's not only going to teach you about yourself, it's going to teach you what you enjoy. And I think being open to learning new things is the best way to find what you enjoy. You know, you're not going to know if you like the broccoli until you eat it. So give it a try.
So
try something new.
What is the last thing that you have learned, and what made it so rewarding?
Well, I'm learning something new right now. Someone else that I found online over COVID is, her name's Selena, and she's in school right now for some sociology and psychology, but she loves to make posts about jump rope. So she has a team that she does jump rope competitions with, and she's inspired me to learn how to jump rope. It seems kind of simplistic, but if you check out her page, it's selena.jumps. She has tons of videos for beginners, but she has the ability to do so many things with a jump rope that I did not think were possible. And in my mind, it's a great way to challenge my brain to focus on something while also working on my fitness. So yeah, I jump rope in my basement now.
Perfect. Sounds solid.
It's still snowing anyway.
Well, that's awesome. That is all we have for today's episode. So thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thanks, Chris. It was nice to spend some time with you today.